Dear ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you once again to today's introduction to the mobile-first design approach. My name is Julian, as said, and I have my own web agency and a software startup, as said. Why am I talking to you about mobile-first today? Yes, I'm a UX designer, and our software is heavily focused on mobile devices. The mobile-first approach crossed my mind quite a time ago, and I think it's really an important thing, especially for the future. So I decided to do this speech today about this topic. Let's have a quick look at today's agenda and the topics we are going to cover within this presentation. Our first topic will be the mobile-first approach in general, followed by the mobile-first in WordPress context. Afterwards, we will cover the do's and don'ts when designing a web platform mobile first. Our last bullet point for today will be the disadvantages of the mobile first principle. For basic understanding, the mobile first approach is a special strategy for designing applications or web systems. What differs from a basic design process is that we focus on the most important features and modules which clearly have to be integrated in our product. So the basic thinking behind this strategy is to focus on the essentials and not to invest more coding expense as necessary for given usability. What does this mean in detail? During our design process, we are restricting on the essentials of our platform. We want to bring a maximum of performance to all devices throughout our implementation process. We refuse to use big images or complex functionalities and animations. And we try to avoid JavaScript when possible. The focus of mobile first is to create an optimal solution for mobile end devices. That means that the design sketches for our platform get created for mobile devices at first and will then be scaled up and enhanced for bigger screens. As we can see on this image, the sketch is first built for the mobile device and got then scaled up for the desktop device. You might notice now that the desktop version looks a bit empty and lost, which can indeed be seen as a disadvantage of the mobile-first approach, but we will cover that later on again. Why is mobile-first worth mentioning at all? For quite a time, mobile devices aren't a niche anymore. They are moreover becoming the main target audience for marketers. Mobile traffic increases every year. Almost everyone we know owns a smartphone or a tablet now, and they use it on a regular basis for research, for communication, and of course, for standard surfing, shopping, etc. Let's underpin this statement with some figures. According to statistics.com, more than 54% of 2021's web traffic came from mobile devices. That's a lot. As you can see, in 2015, 31% of the traffic came from mobile devices. When you have a look at the development over time, this figure could be clearly doubled in the next 3 years. That's the reason why we should focus on creating mobile optimized web platforms and systems for our customers. When designing a platform mobile first, we are not just doing reverse responsive design, as you could think. We are, moreover, creating a new type of usability. Of course, the screen size of a mobile device is not nearly such a creative playground as a desktop screen that we are used to design on. But picture that. In terms of the smaller screen size, we are rethinking the whole strategy. We are removing unnecessary elements or distractive functionality and create an even more user-friendly and structured application for our users. The resulting creative platform is extremely easy to use and clear. We also have to consider that more and more elderly people get used to using smartphones or tablets. So it can just be advantageous for us to deliver and focus on a clear and intuitive user experience. Since the Google mobile update, search requests on mobile devices get different SERPs as they will get on desktop devices. That means when you search something on your desktop, you are getting other results from the search engine than when you search from a mobile device. That means that we have to build a mobile optimized platform for ranking good, both on desktop and mobile devices. I won't dive deeper into the Google mobile update because this would exceed the capabilities of this presentation. But let's cover one important topic, the ranking factor, which Google uses to validate your site is mobile friendliness. Google offers their own service for a mobile friendliness validation of any site, which can be reached via the Search Console. You may have seen this before. You can enter your URL to your site, and it checks different aspects and validates if your site is so-called mobile friendly. But what makes your site mobile friendly at all? There are several aspects to consider for declaring our site as mobile friendly. We will have to deliver responsive content. Our content should be easily readable. Links should be easy to read and click. And of course, a short loading time must be given, which is not only an aspect for mobile friendliness, but also for our conversion rate, especially on mobile devices. On the other hand, what makes our website mobile unfriendly? This could be due to small text. When your links are too close together and not easily clickable, or when your content is just too wide for your viewport and leads to side scrolling. How were websites optimized a couple of years ago? As you probably noticed, I'm still quite young. I have dealt with WordPress since 7 years now, although the first stable WordPress version was released in January 2004. So there is still about 11 years of lack of experience that I'm missing. So how do I even dare to include this in my presentation? No worries. I got myself some help from several colleagues and a couple of old stagers when it comes to WordPress usage. WordPress themes haven't always been mobile optimized or responsive. Back then, there was almost no mobile web traffic because there haven't been iPhones or Android smartphones. And so mobile browsing wasn't just the best practice for us. That, of course, firstly led to a smashed mobile version, as I like to call it, which is basically just a scaled down version of the desktop website in a mobile container, as you can see on the image. This, of course, led to reading and interactional errors, and of course, a very, very bad user experience because the content wasn't well structured, way too small, and just not usable. As the mobile traffic increased, most themes have been rebuilt to deliver their content in a responsive way throughout various screen sizes. Meanwhile, another important milestone to consider was achieved: page builders, a completely new way to design websites on a WordPress environment, especially for non-techies. The most valuable thing page builders gave us is the full breakpoint control, and consequently an all-in-one solution for designing our desktop and mobile views in a responsive way. We don't want to dive deeper into page builders today. What's important for us and our topic is the technique used by page builders for creating responsive pages, the so-called grid layout. When speaking of the implementation of the mobile-first approach, we use a technique called progressive enhancement, which you can see on the bottom of the screen, which means we are creating a version of our site with basic functionality and add features when it comes to a bigger screen size. The idea behind that is that mobile browsers don't have that type of performance as desktop browsers do. This type of upscaling is mostly achieved with a grid layout, as said. Our page builders use this exact grid layout, which gives us full control of scaling up. When normally designing a website, we use the principle of graceful degradation, which is the exact opposite of progressive enhancement. Means we are building a platform with tons of functionality, effects, and using the full size of a desktop viewport. Then we are slightly decreasing functionality or disable elements as the screen size gets smaller. Now that we pointed out the theory behind the mobile-first approach in detail, let's come to some do's for us as creators when designing a mobile-first application or platform. One of the most important things is proper text sizing. You might ask now, what defines proper? Good question. You have to consider that a mobile device is considerably smaller than a desktop device, but it's mostly also closer to our eyes when using it than a desktop device would be. That's why we can use, for example, 16 pixels text sizing for fluent text sections on mobile devices and desktop devices. 16 pixels is a good reference point for flowing text, while about 22 pixels is good for headings. The main point is that the text should just not be too small and easy to read. This, of course, varies when using different fonts and font styles. A hamburger menu. Using a collapsed hamburger menu is a must. If you used your standard header, you would end up having menu items with a size of 6 to 8 pixels, which isn't readable or usable. And this, of course, has an enormous impact on our ranking. A hamburger menu also gives you extra space for other important elements you want to include, like your phone number or social links when you do the slide in. A call to action in your menu bar. We now have a header with a hamburger menu that takes like 30% of our screen width when it's properly sized. So what do we do with our left up space? To fill the empty space, we use a call to action on the other side of the screen. This can, for example, lead to a specific page or include a direct link to a phone call or an email action. Let's take a restaurant site as an example. When accessing a restaurant's mobile site, most users are on the go and planning on getting there to grab some food. So they mostly want to check out opening times. That's why best practice for this scenario would be a call to action that leads directly to our opening times when we are placing it on our website. Of course, this is a great example for using analytics. If we analyze the mobile version of our site for a while, we'd probably find out that a specific page is called more often than the others. That's the opportunity for us to grant quick access to that page for our mobile users. Especially when we are on the go, the lighting situation of our environment might not always be the best. So it's even more important to give our users good contrast levels, that we can make sure our content and clickable elements are clearly visible and readable. That's why, for example, Spotify changed their button font color from white to black, as you may have noticed if you use the app. Another important point is that our clickable elements have to be pointed out as clickable elements and don't get lost in the leftover UI or in the content flow. That's why they should be emphasized with an accent color or be covered in a button shape. Bottom navigation bars. The average smartphone user runs about 10 apps a day. Many of them, like Instagram, Facebook, or other social networks, come with a bottom navigation bar. That's why the user is used to navigate through applications with a bottom navigation bar. And that's why many website creators consider a bottom navigation bar in their design process, because it's just a user experience that we are used to. Of course, this is not applicable for every platform and has to be researched very well before implemented. Especially on mobile devices, it is really important to make your header sticky. I still see lots of websites not having a sticky header. What are the consequences of that? Even if the average smartphone user scrolls more than 90 meters with their fingers a day, our users will still get annoyed when they have to scroll all the way up every time they finish reading one page of our site. Even if you don't include a sticky header because of design reasons, there is some type of workaround. The so-called scroll to top button that we might all know from several websites, which is indeed helpful in some situations. But of course, there is a negative aspect using this type of button. We are covering our upcoming content in the scroll motion. Imagine also having a quick contact bubble on the other side of the screen. Now you'd even more cover even more of your content. And that's also the reason why you shouldn't combine a sticky header with a scroll to top button. You just cover up too much space of your viewport. Now that we covered lots of do's for mobile first design, let's come to some don'ts. One thing that I mentioned before is exceeding our display or viewport screen width, which leads to side scrolling on mobile devices. That just ruins our user experience. So make sure your sections are at a maximum of 100 viewport width. Hover effects. In particular, they are non-existent on mobile devices, so we shouldn't use them. Indeed, there is some type of workaround in JavaScript which emulates the classic hover effect on touch start. But why don't this make sense at all? Why would we create fancy effects or even change the content of an element when touching it? We won't even be able to read it or see it because our finger covers it. So no hover effects when designing mobile first. Complex animations or fly-in parallax sections should also be avoided when it comes to mobile first design. Of course, we do not have to cut all of our animations out, but don't exaggerate it. Like take the Apple product site as an example, where nearly every element is parallax or animated in some type of way. That's what we would call an animation overload. How do we implement a site based on the mobile first approach on WordPress? Page builders can be used for achieving a structured and clean layout, which is created in our designs, even though it's not the one way to go. The best way to achieve a good mobile first experience is to code an own theme, which is focused on the most important things and has reduced JavaScript code and focuses on a clean look. Without a doubt, the mobile first design approach also has disadvantages, which we will have a look at now. Undoubtedly, we have to deal with shrunk down creativity when working with a smaller screen size. That's like growing up on the countryside with cornfields and large green areas, and then moving to the city and ending up with a 2 square meter garden on your balcony. For us creative heads, it's very hard to think about scaling up to a bigger device than scaling down to a smaller one. Imagine you are writing an essay. It's way easier to remove content afterwards than adding extra content in retrospect. Also, many applications look quite similar now, because on a mobile device, we have limited space, and there are already so much best practices for structuring layouts and design options out there. So we can't be extraordinary creative. The mobile first approach can definitely hurt our user experience on desktop devices. For example, if we keep our Hamburger menu on a desktop view, the user would just have to make an extra click to open it, which could be avoided. Also, we might often end up with a lot of leftover space and an empty look on our desktop devices, which could have been better used. To sum it up, mobile first is a very interesting approach for creating a new type of usability and clear-looking user interfaces, but clearly not the one way everybody should follow. More and more devices will come out in the future. That's why we as creators have to focus on where and in what context our applications will be used the most before we think about what design principle we should follow. That's what we could call device conscious design. And that was my input about mobile first. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Also, special thanks again to Martin for giving me the opportunity to speak today.